right, we're less than 24 hours away from the start of the 2024 college football playoff, the first ever 12-team playoff, which of course involves first-round games at home stadiums. I couldn't be more excited. I've been looking forward to this for literally over a year since they announced this format. Some people didn't like the 12-team expansion. Some did. That's fine either way. But home playoff games are going to be unbelievable. I can't wait to watch. I talked about the Notre Dame-Indiana game yesterday. Today, I'm going to talk about what I think is probably the most anticipated first-round matchup of them all, at least in terms of which game people seem to be talking about the most. I'm going to talk about Tennessee on the road in Columbus to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Before we get to that, though, make sure you check out today's sponsor, PrizePicks. All right, y'all, make sure you check out PrizePicks.com. Use promo code Uncle Lou, uppercase letters, no spaces, Uncle Lou, and they got a great bonus for you, $50. That's right. All you got to do is get signed up using promo code Uncle Lou. Make any $5 play, and whether you win or lose, they're going to give you $50 instantly, courtesy of yours truly, Uncle Lou. That's prizepicks.com. It's really easy to use. You just pick 2 players or more, and then you pick more or less on their stat line. It's that simple. And you can win up to 100 times your money. And of course, we got all these exciting playoff games coming up, and some of these numbers are hard to turn down. Dylan Sampson, more or less than 93.5 rushing yards. Yeah, I'll take more. Quinn Ewers, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns at home against Clemson. What do y'all think about that one? I don't know. Nico, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns on the road in Columbus. I don't know. I think Tennessee's probably going to run the ball. We'll see. Cade Klubnik, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns on the road in Austin. Riley Leonard at home, more or less than 26.5 pass attempts against Indiana. I like less there. I think Notre Dame's going to pound Indiana with Jeremiah Love in that running game. Kevin Jennings, the quarterback for SMU, they got to go on the road to Happy Valley. More than 1.5 passing touchdowns for Kevin Jennings at SMU. I don't know. Got to be careful picking these road teams. Anyway, just pick 2 or more players, more or less on the stat line. And like I said, you can win up to 100 times your money. When you get signed up, make sure you use promo code Uncle Lou, one word, uppercase letters without any spaces, just Uncle Lou. And they're going to give you a $50 bonus. Make any $5 play, and whether you win or lose, get that $50 instantly, courtesy of me, Uncle Lou. Check them out, prizepicks.com. All right, now I've gone back and forth on making a pick on this game really since the playoff seeding was announced a couple of Sundays ago. I think this is going to be an unbelievable game, Tennessee on the road at Ohio State. Let's talk about Ohio State first. There seems like there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State, particularly Ryan Day, I think, to win this game for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's just a huge game. No matter what team or coach or players are playing in a playoff game, there's always pressure involved with a playoff game. So you've got just the inherent pressure of this being an elimination game, right? For Ryan Day, he's lost 4 straight to Michigan. He missed out on the Big Ten title game again this past season. The fan base at Ohio State is pounding him on the head. The critics are all over him for good reason in a lot of cases. And this feels like a game that Ryan Day has to have if he wants to remain the coach of Ohio State. And it's hard to believe I'm saying that with the number of games he has won overall. But he has just gotten to the point now where he just seems to keep bumping his head against the same ceiling over and over and over again. And once a certain amount of people get tired of that same lackluster result, it's going to stop mattering that you're winning 10 and 11 games a year when you're losing to Michigan every year, you're losing to some other team every year, in this case, Oregon. You're not winning the Big Ten. You're getting bounced out of the playoffs. A lot of pressure on Ryan Day to bounce back from that Michigan game. And then you've got kind of the Ohio State versus the SEC pressure. And I don't know how much of that pressure Ryan Day and Ohio State is feeling, but I mean, you look at Ryan Day's performance against the SEC in his time at Ohio State, and it's not good. What is he, 0-3, 0-4, something like that? I mean, the last time Ohio State was in just about this exact same situation, you go back 2 years ago. They lose at home to Michigan. They're depressed. The fans are mad. Fire Ryan Day. And then the playoff selection committee puts Ohio State in to the 4-team playoff, and they get matched up against Georgia in the first round, and they lose. Now, it was a great game. In fact, it's probably one of the best games Ohio State has played during Ryan Day's tenure as head coach. C.J. Stroud had arguably the best game of his career. It was an unbelievable game. And it came down to a field goal at the end, and Ohio State missed it. And that's great. It was close. They had opportunities to win. Some have made the case they should have won. All of that is great. But you ask anybody today who won that game, And they're going to tell you Georgia. In the end, it was just another loss for Ryan Day and Ohio State to the SEC. And now they get a chance, Ryan Day does, to kind of redeem a lot of that in a big game, a playoff game, a potential elimination. Well, not a potential, it is an elimination game at home against SEC opponent Tennessee. Now, I feel like Tennessee's got some pressure here, too, to a different degree, different type of pressure. Like Ohio State, there's the sort of inherent pressure that goes along with playing in a playoff game, right? You had a good regular season. You've been rewarded with a spot in the playoffs. Now it's win or go home. Tennessee's got to travel. They don't have any experience in these types of games or situations. They never made the 14 playoff, right? Tennessee didn't. Never mind Josh Heupel or any of the current players on this roster. So since sort of an unfamiliar situation on top of it being an unfamiliar environment on the road at Ohio State. So the pressure is there of this being a playoff game. And then I don't think the pressure here is directly on Josh Heupel in the same way that it is on Ryan Day. Josh Heupel hasn't lost to his rival 4 years in a row. Josh Heupel hasn't lost the last time they were in the playoffs in the first round. In other words, there hasn't been this long list. Now, so on one hand, you say, well, that means they haven't been as good as Ohio State. That's true. They haven't. The pressure that Tennessee has here headed into this game is more of a program pressure. They really haven't won anything since 1998. And, you think 1998, go, oh, yeah, that's the last time they won the national title. And that's true. That is the last time they won the national title. But that's the last time they even won the SEC. So when you start looking at Tennessee's list of accomplishments as a program, of course, everybody always wants to start with national titles. Then you want to talk about conference titles. And then you kind of go down from there, maybe big bowl games or New Year's Six games or whatever the case. And Tennessee has been involved in a couple of New Year's Six games over the last few years. But in the last 26 years, Tennessee has 0 national titles, 0 SEC titles. Of course, they didn't win the SEC again this season. But this is the biggest game Tennessee has played in since 1998. When they won the national title. And while this game will not decide the winner of the national title, we didn't have a 12-team playoff back then. And Tennessee was never able to get into the 14 playoff. So this is their first shot at sort of the new age of college football postseason. And because it's been so long and the Tennessee fans just seem starved for anything meaningful, really, when it comes to football. And the majority of that kind of destitute that Tennessee has found itself in over the last 26 years, of course, is not Josh Heupel's responsibility, right? He's only been there 4 years. None of the players were there 6 years ago, 8 years ago when they were going 0-8 in the SEC, or all those years without winning the SEC. They've only been there in some cases 1 year, in some cases maybe 3 or 4. But program pressure here on Tennessee to get what would be the program's biggest win this century since 1998. So I think there's pressure on both sides here. Now, when you look at just the matchup, the game, what types of teams are these and how are they going to sort of line up against each other? Well, they're kind of similar teams, which is a little bit odd in both cases. Tennessee still has this sort of perception, I think, nationally, of being kind of a spread you out and air it out type of team. They've really never been that under Josh Heupel. Now, there have been years in the past where they have had a very successful passing game in spots. The Hendon Hooker year is a good example of that. They had several really good wide receivers, and every single game, Tennessee hit a couple of those deep balls. And, of course, the game that most people point to when talking about sort of the Josh Heupel era under Tennessee is that first win over Alabama a couple of seasons ago in a game that looked, had a basketball score. It was whatever, it ended up being 52-49 or something like that. Tennessee kicks the game-winning field goal at the end. And Tennessee had 3 or 4 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown passes in that game. And for some reason, when people think about Tennessee under Josh Heupel, that tends to be kind of what they think about. Well, they beat Alabama, threw it all over the place, Hendon Hooker throwing bombs. Tennessee runs the ball and plays really good defense. And to a pretty big extent, that's kind of what they've been under Josh Heupel. Now, I think they have probably the best running game they've had this season under Josh Heupel, but they've always been kind of a run the ball, play really good defense. They hit you with that tempo on offense, that hurry up offense. And look, if you're not ready on the outside, then yeah, they will take that deep shot over the top. And they still do that now. They've been a lot less successful at it this season. than they have in seasons past with first-year starter Nico at QB. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of potential. He would probably perform really well at an NFL combine like right now in terms of measurable stuff. How tall is he? Wingspan, hand, however they measure your hand in that, throwing the ball a mile. He has struggled with accuracy in game on some of those deep balls, but they don't struggle to run the ball and they don't struggle to play really good defense. And when you look at Ohio State, interestingly, they have kind of become that. Now, Ohio State has been a team, even under Ryan Day, you go back 2, 3, 4 years, that did kind of spread out, air it out, all these NFL wide receivers, right? You look at all the numbers that C.J. Stroud put up, Justin Fields before that, these 4,000 plus yard seasons that these quarterbacks had, these Heisman or close to Heisman type seasons. They were really good teams, but they kept coming up short against Michigan, Georgia, Oregon a few years ago at home and during the regular season. And they made that sort of conscious change. You know, we're going to bring Jim Knowles in. We're going to change sort of our attitude and our mentality on defense. We're going to beef up the line of scrimmage. We're going to get some running backs in here, and we're going to play Michigan football with a more talented roster is basically the approach Ohio State took. And that's what they've been doing, but it hasn't been working. They still lose to Michigan. They still lose to Georgia a couple of years ago. But they're a really, really good defensive team and one of the best defenses in the country. They've got 2 of the best running backs in the country. You can throw Dylan Sampson. You want to make a list of the best 5 or 6 running backs, and I'm not going to get into a debate over actually ranking running backs or whatever. But Tennessee running back Dylan Sampson, along with Ohio State running backs Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, are 3 of the best 5 or 6 running backs in all of football. They just are. Dylan Sampson led the SEC in rushing. Ohio State with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson have had a great year running the ball. Their issues have been more along the offensive line. There's no issues with those 2 running backs. So great running backs here. Tennessee's got maybe the best defense in the SEC this year, if not top 3 for sure. Texas, really good defensively. South Carolina at times, really good defensively. Georgia at times, really good defensively, a little inconsistent over there. But anyway, again, the point is not necessarily where you rank Tennessee within the top 2 or 3 defensively in the SEC. The point is they're in the top 2 or 3 defensively in the SEC. And you can make the case for Ohio State in the Big Ten. Oregon's got a good defense. Penn State's got a good defense. Ohio State's got a good defense. 3 of the best defenses, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country right there. And Ohio State is right in the mix. So you got 2 really good defenses here, 2 teams that really like to run the ball. You got Tennessee, quarterback probably a little bit more talented, a much higher ceiling, more potential than a Will Howard at Ohio State, but no experience, right? This is his first year. You've seen that, some growing pains, some timing issues, misses some open receivers downfield from time to time, makes some throws maybe you wish he wouldn't make, scrambles around a little too early sometimes. Typical first-year starter stuff, right? But when you watch him, you just can tell it's there somewhere if he ever finds it. Will Howard, much lower ceiling than Nico, right? Probably not going to ever throw for 450 yards to win a shootout type game. Like, think about the Georgia-Ohio State game from a couple of years ago, right? Take out C.J. Stroud, put in Will Howard. Ohio State probably loses that game by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And again, that's not to shit on Will Howard. Ohio State is a different kind of team now than they were then, right? I think everybody knows that. So I like sort of the difference. These 2 teams are very similar with some very obvious and stark contrasting differences. Quarterback being one. They both have talented wide receiver rooms. They both got good running backs. Ohio State's offensive line has been an issue at points this year. They can point to the injuries or whatever else. The reality is we're into the 2nd, 3rd week of December here. We've been playing football since the last week of August. Everybody's got injuries, okay? There are people that started for Tennessee back in September that aren't playing now because they're hurt and injured. Just like with Ohio State. You have 85 scholarships. Everybody does. Next man up, you got to find somebody to put in. But it is true that Ohio State has taken a beating along the offensive line, and it has cost them in a couple of spots. It nearly cost them a loss against Nebraska earlier this year when they just got absolutely manhandled. In fact, that Nebraska game for Ohio State is probably the worst I've seen them play. Now, I know they ended up winning the game, and they've got 2 losses to Michigan and to Oregon. But I thought they looked really, really bad and just lost up front offensively in that game against Nebraska, and were really lucky to hang on to win that thing. Tennessee's got kind of a stumble of their own on the road at Arkansas when they lost to a pretty average Arkansas team, and that's being generous, I think. Which brings me to the other point, or another point here, the home and away aspect of this game here. Home field advantage should always be a massive advantage. But in these playoffs, it should be something like we've never seen before. These home environments should be borderline unplayable for the visiting team. If you relate it to the college football game that everybody was talking about last offseason, right? Because it came out for the first time in a decade or whatever it was. And they have the little crowd meter up in the corner, and the more intense the game gets and the bigger home field advantage that the team you're playing has, the screen starts to shake and you try to look at your wide receivers' routes and they're just squiggly lines, or in some cases no lines at all. Players are confused, jump off sides. That should be something all of that should be happening in these home playoff games to a level and an extent that we've never seen before. And that's not good for Tennessee, because of all the good that has happened under Tennessee since Josh Heupel took that job 3 or 4 years ago, they have not been able to get out of their own way on the road. They have struggled massively on the road against some pretty average to honestly pretty bad teams. Losing on the road to Florida, not this season, but last season, was just totally unacceptable. Losing to Arkansas this year, totally unacceptable. They've managed to beat Bama twice in the last 3 years, but that was at home in Neyland. They have lost to Bama every time they've played there for about 25 years. Now, only the last 4 or 5 would be Josh Heupel's deal there, but they have really struggled on the road. You look at Tennessee's win at Oklahoma earlier this year. That was week 3, if I remember right, maybe 4. We didn't really know how bad Oklahoma was at that particular time, right? And so Tennessee goes in there and gets, I don't know, a 10-point win or something. Was it 25-15 or something like that? And wow, Tennessee went in there and got a win on the road against Oklahoma. Well, now you look back and you go, I don't know how impressive that was. Oklahoma was a very good point. Is Tennessee's really struggled on the road. Ohio State's got some struggles of their own that factor into this game, and it's Ohio State's struggle against the SEC. I talked about Ryan Day's record against the SEC, which is bad. Ohio State's struggle against the SEC go back to the beginning of football. When you talk about postseason games, and we're in the postseason here, Ohio State is 2-14 all time against the SEC. Now, that in and of itself, I guess, has nothing to do with this game in particular, right? Whatever those 15 or 16 teams were that Ohio State played over the last 100 years are not this year's Tennessee team. I get that. But for whatever reason, the SEC just seems to own and dominate Ohio State in postseason play. 2-14 all time. This goes, like I said, this goes back over 100 years. And they're going to get an opportunity to sort of, start to rewrite some of that, start to right the ship there, if they can somehow get a win over this Tennessee team. The spread on this game is Ohio State favored by 7.5. I think that's too many points. If I didn't know what the spread was on this game, I would have thought maybe 4 or 5. You get about 3 points for home field advantage. And you go, okay, maybe the bookmakers think Ohio State's a couple of points better. I think 7.5 is too many points. I think this is going to be a really close game. If Ohio State comes out and sort of tries to prove something, which seemed to be what they were doing against Michigan, I think the result is going to be the same. In other words, if Ohio State comes out and goes, you know what, we're tired of these sort of accusations and the innuendo floating around that we're a soft team, or we're soft offensively, or our lines of scrimmage are soft, or we have a soft mentality, we're just going to line up and pound it. Well, you tried that against a terrible Michigan team and it didn't work. And Tennessee's defense is better than Michigan's this season. Michigan's got a good defense. Their team is terrible. Michigan does have a good defense. Tennessee's is better. The front seven in particular at Tennessee is one of the best in the country. If Ohio State just thinks they're going to line up and run between the tackles because they want to prove something to everybody, they're going to lose this game just like they lost to Michigan. They can't do it. They just can't do it. I think Will Howard's going to have to win this game for Ohio State, and it's something that we haven't really seen him have to do at Ohio State. There was the game at Oregon where I thought for the most part, actually, Will Howard played pretty well. He had that sort of gaffe at the end of the game where he slid with no time left on the clock, and he is, what are you doing? That kind of thing. But if you just sort of remove that last play, I think Will Howard played pretty good considering the circumstances. You got to remember that was early in the season. It was only week 2, or it might have been week 4. Anyway, he hadn't played very many games at Ohio State. It was on the road, hostile environment against what we now know is potentially the best team in the country in Oregon. And I thought Will Howard played pretty good. Good enough to win the game for the most part, right? He's going to have a game similar to that, maybe even better, I think, if they want to win this game at home against Tennessee. Not that they'll abandon the run. You got to run the ball. You can't be one-dimensional offensively against these good defensive teams. You just can't do it. You have got to mix in the run and the pass. And Ohio State is clearly going to attempt to run the ball. I'm not suggesting that they aren't or that they shouldn't. But they've got an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position that I feel like this year have gone underutilized. Now, to a certain degree, I feel like that has made Ohio State a better team overall, more complementary. They are relying less on the sort of pure talent of the wide receivers on the outside, which they were guilty of doing in years past with players like Marvin Harrison Jr. Just snap the ball, let them run down the field. Will C.J. Stroud will throw it up in the air and they'll come down and catch it type of thing, just because they were so talented. And they won a lot of games that way. But they didn't get where they wanted to go. And we talked about that, and they've switched things up, more of a physical team, play defense, run the ball. I think here they're obviously going to have to play good defense again, but I think they're going to have to take some chances with the ball offensively and let Will Howard air it out, test that Tennessee secondary. I'm trying to think like teams that Tennessee played this year that had like a really good legitimate or the ability to have a really good or legitimate passing attack. They played Georgia, and it didn't go well. Georgia kind of lit them up. I think Carson Beck had about 350 yards passing against Tennessee and beat Tennessee easily by a couple of touchdowns at home. Alabama, who at times this year has shown the ability to move the ball through the air, although it was more like Ohio State. Jalen Milroe would kind of close his eyes and throw the ball up in the air, and Ryan Williams would run and catch it. Jalen Milroe's not exactly going to pick you apart back there in the pocket, so that might not even be a very good analogy. They haven't played a whole lot of teams, I guess is what I'm getting at, Tennessee, who have the ability outside at the wide receiver position to really test their secondary. And so we'll see if that's what Ohio State decides to do. If you're Tennessee and you want to win this game, unlike Ohio State, who I think needs to kind of change things up a little and make a conscious choice to do something different in order to win this game, throw the ball more, trust Will Howard, put the game in his hands. I think Tennessee's got to come out and do what they've been doing all year. Play aggressive defense, fly to the ball, great along the lines of scrimmage, protect Nico in the obvious passing situations. Dylan Sampson's going to have to get going and have a good day on the ground, which he's done in just about every game they've played this year. And I guess to a certain degree, like Ohio State, they're going to have Nico connect on, he doesn't have to hit 5 or 6 of those deep balls like Hendon Hooker did against Alabama a couple of years ago. But he's probably got to hit 1 or 2 of them. And, you're only going to get a couple of opportunities like that against a really good defense like Ohio State. If you waste them by overthrowing the ball 10 yards or underthrowing it 10 yards or even worse, throwing a pick, I don't know how well that's going to work out for Tennessee in the end. I'm excited to watch this game like I am all of the playoff games starting tomorrow night with Notre Dame and Indiana. This is the toughest one for me to pick in terms of just picking a winner. It's pretty easy for me against the spread. I'm going to take Tennessee plus 7.5 as far as betting on this game and betting on the spread. I don't think either one of these teams is going to win by more than a touchdown, and 7.5 just seems like too many points to me. I could see either team winning this game. I think it's going to come down to, I think, Tennessee's secondary versus Ohio State's willingness to trust Will Howard to maybe win them the game and the performance of Will Howard and those wide receivers. And Nico's ability to connect on a deep ball or two. Does he connect on it? Or do they miss, which is kind of what happened in the Georgia game. They just didn't hit on those. I'm going to go with Tennessee to win the game. I think they go into Columbus and get the win out, right? And I don't know how long this video is now, probably close to 20 minutes. I've been trying really hard not to troll. So I guess I'll do that a little bit at the end here. But I could have, you can kind of just forget and erase everything that I've said in this video because it's honestly as simple as this. When Ohio State gets dressed on Saturday to play this game, and when Tennessee gets dressed on Saturday to play this game, one of these teams is going to have a Big Ten logo on it, and the other one's going to have an SEC logo on it. And unfortunately for the Big Ten, the team whose uniform is going to have that Big Ten logo on it is Ohio State. The O's, the block O's. And Ohio State can't beat the SEC to save their life. They just can't. No matter how hard Ohio State tries, they'll never be as good as the SEC. Give me Tennessee to win a close one. Tennessee plus 7.5 is the bet. Have a good morning.